4 Israeli soldiers have been released under the Gaza ceasefire deal. I can now show you those pictures again of that moment where they were walked out by those Hamas fighters, and they were then taken onto a stage, and the 4, who are Karine Ariev, 20 years old, Daniela Gilboa, who's also 20, Nama Levy, who is 20, and Lariri Albag, who is now 19, were taken by those Hamas fighters, they were dressed in uniforms, as you can see. This in Palestine Square in Gaza City, where we had seen building up a number of those Hamas fighters, and also a number of civilians also surrounding that area. This handover this time not as chaotic as we saw on Sunday when the first of the hostages were released. As Rushdie was saying, the Hamas fighters more control over this. Earlier they had signed what were some documents with the 2 members of the International Red Cross. There you can see the 4 young soldiers putting their thumbs up and waving with smiles on their faces, and they have now been driven away in those Red Cross vehicles, and they will be, of course, handed over to the Israeli military. We know that helicopters have been seen at a military base near to the border, the Israeli forces ready to take them, so they'll go into the IDF, and then of course they will have medical checks and they will be reunited with their families. Let's bring in Yolande Nell, who is in Tel Aviv in Hostages Square. And Yolande, we've seen the pictures of people crying and also cheering when they saw those pictures. Just explain what it was like at that moment in Hostages Square.
Well, I mean, through the morning there has been a tense calm that's set in, and people from the Hostage and Missing Families Forum told me that they were very worried that perhaps these women would not appear in good health, that they might not all even be alive. They're worried about psychological warfare on the part of Hamas. So you can imagine that when those 4 women aged 19 and 20 appeared in Gaza, then were walked onto a stage briefly there, people were smiling, they were cheering and whistling, and right now you can still see sort of around me, people are breathing a sigh of relief. Now we've seen those Red Cross vehicles in Palestine Square in Gaza being driven away. It should not take very long for that convoy to leave the Gaza Strip to make its way to the place where the parents of these 4 young women are waiting for them. And then after initial checks, they will be taken to a hospital in Petah Tikva, which is not far from Tel Aviv. That is the expectation, where they will undergo more in-depth medical checks and also be able to meet more of their loved ones, people who have been desperately waiting for news. But just also to remind you, I mean, this is a day of mixed emotions, really. I'm surrounded by posters which show the other hostages who remain inside Gaza, with many of them not even due to be released under the terms of this initial 6-week ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas that has been negotiated by the US and Qatar and Egypt. So people are extremely worried about those who remain inside, and it's pointed out to us there are some posters around, indeed quite prominently, of one of the remaining young women from this surveillance unit on the edge of Gaza, who was abducted on the very same day at the same time as this group of 4, and she has not been released as part of this deal. We've also not seen returning one of the last remaining women civilian hostages taken from a kibbutz close to Gaza on the 7th of October. And so people remain extremely concerned about those who remain and whether this fragile ceasefire will stick, enabling others to be released.